Hello and welcome to our introduction to JavaScript. So in previous videos of this series I've done a quick HTML start guide and CSS getting up and ready, and as a result we have these two files. So now we're going to go into what is JavaScript. Now for the specific occasion of JavaScript I thought it'd be funny to put in this quick joke meme. Change one line of code and all your tests crash. Hopefully we won't have that problem, but in later development you probably will get this once or twice, but try not to fear, we'll work through it together. So if you haven't already, I recommend getting Visual Studio Code to get up and running. It's a great IDE to get you up and running and contains lots of plugins that we can use alongside JavaScript. So to start, we'll actually want our HTML opened up, because this is the main file that we need to link to. Sorry about that ring in the back. This is the main file that we have to link to, just like we did with our CSS. Now again, there are a few ways we can link a JavaScript file. But the first thing we have to do, of course, is make our scripts.js, JS being the extension for JavaScript. And we could simply link it up here, or we can run our script tag in the body, which is the way I'm gonna do this. Now when we link it up in the body, we could write all of our JavaScript inside of here, and if you wanted to do that, you could essentially write it exactly the same as I'm going to write it, but the way I'm going to do it is inside here, just so I can really focus on the JavaScript and we're not getting distracted by all this up here. So how do we link it? So as we were going to write a script, just putting our script tag there, and as it's an external file, we just handily link to our scripts.js file, which we made there nice and handy, and we save that. If we're just going to write JavaScript in the HTML document, then as I said before, we could write it in these tags, or we could link to it up in the head with the same script and source. One reason why I don't link it in the head is sometimes this can cause problems of the JavaScript file will load before the body. So if we were going to try and grab this, for instance, or this section with an idea of about in our JavaScript, if we're going to grab that and then do something to it with a bit of functionality, then it may not work because our JavaScript's loaded before, so it's had nothing to grab, and then the HTML loads after and it causes some issues. That's why I've put the script tag down here, but there are workarounds that we could do. So we could do a window.unload and then function, and this will make sure that JavaScript will run after the HTML has fully loaded out. But for now we're just going to leave it as it is. So JavaScript, how do we get started and what are we doing? Well, the first thing to note in JavaScript is it's the functionality. But how do we do this? What are we telling the computer is the big question. Now, there's a few things we first need to understand. Before I type anything, I better go over them. In JavaScript, we can store information in variables. these are the most commonly used key thing within JavaScript. We could define it with var, let, or const. And all this is saying is, if we do like a var we'll call this variable, and we'll set it equal to hello. And then on any line of JavaScript code, you always end it with a semicolon. This is like an escape. So it'll read to there, and then it'll go, okay, that statement has ended. We can move on to the next. Equals assigns this variable with the value of hello as a string. We could also do var x equals 2. And notice this is an integer, so we don't put quotes around it. If we put quotes around it, it'd be 2 as a string. Now that I've defined that and we've got string and integer, what's the difference between these? Well, a string is put inside quotes, usually used for something we want to use as text, a text value, and an integer would just be a number, any number. So from here, we'd then think, well, how can we use these? Well, if we quickly show the difference between a string and an integer, that might help. So if we use, we'll just quickly assign this back to an integer, and then we'll have another integer value, and we'll call this 3. And we'll use another string value, we'll call this world, and we'll just put in the string of world. Now we can use single or double quotes, but one thing I'll note straight away now is you have to use one or the other. So if I used a double quote here, it would have to be a double quote here as well. If I used single quotes, they both have to be single quotes. And if I wrote, you notice the code editor will give me a new color on this. It's because it's breaking out, it wraps this in a string, and then it's saying, well, this is no longer in a string. What is this? I'm confused. So if we put in this symbol, a backslash, it acts as an escape. Or the other thing we could do is, if we wrap that in double quotes, that should also work as well, because it's saying, oh, there's a quote, oh, that's a single quote, there's only one of them, so yeah, that should be an apostrophe and not a an actual sort of statement quote. We'll keep it as, well, we'll take that off now, we don't really need it. So there's one function I'm going to introduce. A function is just something that does something, it has functionality to it. These are just information placeholders. If we do x and then we plus y and we save that, it will come in, and what we'll be using is more tools, and then we can just hit F12. Just thought I'd show you. We see we've got a script tag linked here, and if we come into console, we see we get a 5 here. That's because it's loading and then it's doing x, so it's getting a variable x, and then it's getting a variable y, and we've put the plus operator in, so it's adding them both together. And then if we do a console.log call this hello, the variable hello plus world, and we end our statement. Come back in, we get hello world. You notice no space. However, if I put a space on the end of that, we now get a space. It's just handy to know, but it doesn't really matter for the purpose of this. However, if we do a console.log, and we're going to do, just call it a string int. Quick note, JavaScript mainly uses camel casing as its sort of standard. So you'd write string and then I've just done a capital. Just helps the readability along, that's all really. It's just become an industry standard. But then we then do string int equals x plus hello. And we do string int, we save that, come here and we get 2 hello. So it just sort of concatenates something, adds an integer and then hello afterwards. Whereas when you've got 2 integers, it'll add them together, whereas a string, when it's added together, just concatenates everything. We could also do hello.world, but we get undefined. Now, the reason it's undefined is because this dot is like more for objects and functions, but the reason I want to show you what undefined is because it doesn't have a value, it doesn't know what it is, it can't find anything. And the other version of that is null, but null actually means nothing. There is no value, it's literally nothing. Undefined is it doesn't know what the value is. And then if we do plus y, we get 2 hello 3. But what about if we do x plus, we get 2 hello 3. Because this is just concatenating because there's a string involved. Whereas if we do that, we now get 9 because it's adding x, so it's adding 2, and then 2 plus 2, 4, 6, and then adds the y, 9. So it carries out all that functionality. And console log just logs everything to the console, which you can see in your developer tools, which is a great debugging thing, and if you want to just quickly work things out. So that's how you define variables. You just used var. And I mentioned previously that you can use let and const. Like that. The difference is this is like an old ES5, ECMAScript 5 syntax. It's used less, but you probably will see it somewhere along the way. But the new ES6 is this let, which works exactly the same way as var does. So let's z equal 2, we can do that, we could assign it to a string or whatever. The only difference is this, using let, assigns it a certain scope. So if we had a function, or just write the old function, we'll just call it func, so that's the keyword function, saying this is a function. just like this is saying this is a variable, and this says z is a variable, and func is the name, just like y is the name of this variable. If we said let we'll call it scope equal 12, and then we go console.log scope. Scope is not defined. Well, why is that? However, if we copy that, we come in here, and then we save it, we don't get anything. But we write func, and then we get 12. Don't worry about this undefined for now. We get 12 because this let is in the scope of this function. It won't go out, whereas this z is in the global scope. It's, you know, it's not wrapped inside of anything. So we can come in here and do a console log z, and we come in here and we write func. We write it this way to call the function, but we'll get more into that. And then it console logs them both, because this is in global scope. This function has access to this, but the global scope doesn't have access to scope because it's inside the function. That's how scope works. It's a key thing to keep in mind. And the other one was const. Now, if I do console.log z, and then I do z equals 5, I don't have to write let again because it's already, that variable's already defined, but I can go console.log z, and this works same as like HTML did. It reads from the top and works down line by line. It executes each line of code before it moves on to the other. We get 2, and then we get 5. So console log z, it's previously 2, and then we reassign it the value of 5 here, and we console log it again, so we now get 5. However, if I get rid of those consoles, I do const, get rid of that as well, so I can use z again. It equals 2, and then we go console log z, z equals 4, console log z, and we come in, voila. Assignment to const, it means it cannot be reassigned like we previously done when it was let z equal 2 and then reassigned it 5. Const means you cannot change the value once it's already been assigned, otherwise it will throw like the error we just got, and that's the difference between them. Next we have functions. So a shed function func. So this is the standard way to write a function. Again, this is the ES5 way. So ES5 is more, you can use it without issue a lot more because it's got more, how browsers work, like Internet Explorer will probably become the bane of most web developers' existence because they don't put new content into it, whereas Chrome generally runs everything up to date most of the time. But ES5 pretty much has compatibility with all browsers. ES6 is mostly compatible as of today, but there are some things that don't work. But that's where in later life you'll learn about things like Babel and Webpack, but we won't get into that. That's me digressing. Sorry about that. But as I said, a function is something that does something. So if we go x plus y, and then we come over here, and then the console. This is how you call a function. You just pull its name and then the brackets and a semicolon. And oh, what have I done wrong? There we go. Sorry. This return is a keyword which, when you've got it in like sort of function scope and you want to return it to the global scope so it knows what it is, you use return, and it sort of pumps whatever you're doing after that return outside of the scope. It lets other things have access to the information you've just done. So it ran the function, of course, it done x plus y, and because of the variables we assigned here, it calculates that equals 5, and that's what it returned. We could have just done a console log x plus y, and then when we called the function, it would have ran the console log. The other way we can write a function is we can assign it a variable name. So func, and we'll just put es6 equals, and then we use this what's called an arrow function. So this is essentially saying this is the variable and it's equal to a function, and then these parentheses would just like this one up here would take in parameters if you needed any. We might get into them in a bit in a bit. And then it's basically saying the arrow the function does this, go to the next thing, and then you wrap it inside curly braces just like above, and then you can say return hello world, and we come up here and we go func es6, and it gives back hello world, and in the string format as well. Again, we could have done the console log and then wrapped hello plus world inside of that. But that's a function. It just, once it's called, like we've done in the console log, we wrote func brackets and then the semicolon, and it ran that function because it had access to it, because we defined it here. Then it does whatever's inside of here. So we could do a number of things. The world's a rooster, but we just ran a return, so it just shows us what it was doing. It returns the value of operation here. We could also do like a minus, or we do an asterisk for multiplication and a slash for division. Just leave it as plus, nice and simple. We're not mathematicians here. Well, at least I'm not. The next thing we have are arrays. So we can save our array is generally like a shorthand for an array, and it's all just defined inside of these square brackets. So inside of here we could have Dave 21, Sarah with an H 27, and so on. And then we can go console log array, come into here, and we get object array, and then it says what's inside of it. So you can put strings and integers and stuff inside of an array, that's fine. Then we have indexing. So computers are weird and they count from 0. So Dave is index 0, 21 is index 1, Sarah index 2, and 27 is index 3. So just to show, if I do index 2, that should produce Sarah. And there we go, Sarah. And if I put in index 0, we should get Dave, and like we do Dave. That's how an array is. It's just a list. So you could have your normal shopping list in there, eggs, cookies. Everyone loves cookies. Got a bit of milk to go with it, so you got eggs, cookies, milk. Strange diet, I know, but there you go. And that's an array. Now we can dive further into an arrays. We've got, we'll just go let's nested array equal, and then we can do a nested array. I mean, I could write this all in one line like that, but I'm just going to do it this way. I'm going to go Dave again, Paul, cat, and we put a comma to say there's another array, and we go in this one we'll just do ages, so 21, 27, 19, something like that. And we end our thing with the semicolon, and then we go console.log nested array. And just so we don't get like this in our way, we can use a comment, which is just 2 lines like that, or you can do that if it's like multiple lines, but we'll just do that for now, so we don't get that console again out. And then we got 2 arrays, so we can come into that, and we got a first array with an index of 0 because they count from 0. Dave, Paul, cat, and then in the next one we got 12, 27, and 19. And notice it says length 2. It's because 1, 2. Length doesn't count from 0. Just remember that because there's a length function. So array.length would give me 2, but it's counting from 0. So length makes sense, but arrays do count from 0. And we could even have an array inside an array inside an array inside about 20 other arrays, but don't do this because this will probably go over complicated and break somewhere. So it's not best to do it that way. But arrays can be nested inside arrays. And then when you do nested arrays, I can do that. 0, 2. Oh. Sorry. 0, 2. And we get cat. Why is that? It's because we're going into the index of the first array. So we're going into the array and we want index 0. So if we look at that, if we looked at our previous console log, we had this being assigned 0 and this assigned 1. And then we're going, once we're into this array, we're then going to the index of 2. So they count from 0, so 0, 1, and then cat is 2. So that's why console printed out cat. So if we went 1, 2, we should get 19, and we do. And if I done 2, 2, we're going to get nothing. because there isn't an array inside of here of 2, 2. Just copy it out. If you want to shortcut on the thing, just highlight what it is you want and press Control and then the / in Visual Studio Code, and it will comment it out. We can also do it on multiple lines. Nice trick like that, and just press it again if you want it to uncomment. The next thing are objects. So objects are wrapped inside of these curly braces, and how you do them is key value. So console.log obj, that's what we called it. Value is not defined. Okay, that won't work, but it's saying key value pairs. That's how they are defined. So if we have that, and we say sorry, it makes sense if I put it in a logical sense. So console log out object. What do you think we'll get? We get the object, and we get name, and his name's John. Now this is where the dot I talked about before would come in. So we go object.name, and it goes inside the object. It finds, oh, it has name, and then it will just print out the name. If I put John as a property, and then I put in here, and then so this is more like a nested object. We've got John. It'd make more sense if we called that user, and then we put a comma because there's more than one property in here. We say age 21. DOB, and that would be, this is kind of like CSS essentially, with the name, and then you put a colon, but with JavaScript you use the comma to separate objects out. I can't be bothered to work out a date, so just put 2000. That should do it, and we'll wrap that in a string. And we save that, and we can go console.log so we can console log the object, and then we'll console log the user property, and then we can console log object, where we console log user dot name, copy it out, DOB and age, and we'll just go here and put our semicolons on, and then that'll console log out each one. So console logs the whole object, then it console logs the user. So object here is user, and then it shows that it's got an object as the property of that, and then you've got the user object console logged out. So you got an age, a day of birth, and a name, and then we console log out each of them out. So .user.name John, .user.age 21, and user.dob gives us the day of birth string we put in, and that's how an object works. Now there's loads of like keywords and pre-built in JavaScript functions that you could run through, but to run through every single one of them would make the course like 4 hours. So as always, I do recommend W3 schools here. They've got like a large documentation, or you could just type in JS docs, and I believe, yeah, it's this one here. It has a huge array of what you can go through. If you didn't know, Node.js is like JavaScript but on the back end, but again, that's outside our scope, so we won't go into that. But yeah, you can go into JavaScript, you can look at examples, the ES6 stuff, getting started. Yeah, you can look at all that fun stuff. So yeah, that's like what you'd see in JavaScript. So a function returns an object literal. It's probably a bit outside of the scope to explain what them are, but you get the idea. It's nice and handy if you just come through this, so you can go comments in, as we've seen before. We've got the double slashes, operators, we've got our equals, so it assigns the value like we went over, and you got the plus, it adds the values together like we've done. It would also go over like your multiplication, division and subtraction. Arithmetic gives you all the things, so you got modulus, which, if you don't know, to mod something is it shows the remainder, so what's left over after you divide two numbers. So 10 divided by 10 mod 5 would give 0, but 11 mod 5 would give 1. And then you got like a double plus for increment and decrement. Assignments, and yeah, I could go on for ages, but we'll just quickly look at data types. Data types are like, as we went over, this is a number, it's just an integer, you wrap it in quotes and you get a string, and like I shown with the user, you get objects. So go over arrays in here. Oh, booleans as well. So you got true and false. So this double equals is asking, is this equal to this? Are they the same value? And if you had 3 equal signs in a row, then it'd be, is this equal to this and of the same type? Oh, there we go, arrays. So as we've done, you know, you got your array of cars and your objects. A boolean is true or false only, 1 or 0. 1 is true, 0 is false. That's sort of how it is. So if I went into our VS Code, I could say that truth equal true, and that would be assigning a boolean value to that. And then I could do a we'll just do a ES5 function, nice and quick. Is truth, and then we can say we're passing a parameter here, so we'd put in something has to go into this function, and then x. And another cool thing we can do is an if statement. So if x equal to 10, we can do console.log true, and then we do else console.log false. So this is nice and handy. We'll put a value into X. So we'll pass something in, which is saying is a random thing that if X is equal to 10, then it will say true. If it's not, then it'll be false. So we can come in here, we can say is truth, and we can say 10, and we get true. Is truth, is stupid thing, is truth 9, false. See how it works? If statements are simple. So think of it like everyday life. If raining, take umbrella. If cold, take coat. Then you got if-else statements, which would be like, if very cold, if cold and raining, take coat and umbrella. If cold, take coat. Else, wear shorts. That's how it'd be. So an else if would be else if, just like that. And you'd wrap something around in parentheses, like if X is larger than 10, and then you'd have your else down here, because you need something to do if neither of these are correct. So if the number is not equal to 10 and it's not, if the number is smaller than 10, then we'll do console.log, and we can just put in quotes smaller than 10. Smaller and not equal to 10, if that makes sense. The other one we have is a we'll just call this a for statement, and this basically is a for loop. That's what it's called. So we'll just type out, and then we'll use our array from before actually. So and remember that increment, if you can remember, that you saw in the WS code reference, there was an increment. It basically goes, so if this is 0, then it will run this code, and then it will make it 1, and then if it runs it again, which is what a for loop does, it just keeps looping until it breaks out of this, so we set the condition here. So you don't really need to assign a let, but for this, well, you don't need to assign a let if something is already defined as like an initiator, an initiating value. But we want an initiating value, so we defined I in there. And now, well, I is smaller than array.length, so our array up here, we're gonna console.log array, and then we're just gonna put I in index. So this will loop through until this condition is not met, and this increment will run all the code, and then it will say, I is here, so we're going to put that through, and then after the code is run, we're going to increment it. If we put the plus here, then it would make that 1 before it runs the code, so it wouldn't pull out index 0, if that makes sense. So we run that, and then we run, what's it called again? For statement. For statement, and then we run that. This went wrong. Did I console log out the array? A double R. Oh, sorry, got that the wrong way I want it to be. Yeah, so if I was greater than, then it wouldn't produce anything. So yeah, if we run that and then we run for statements, check that out, and it loops through. So first I is 0, so array index 0. Then it becomes 1 because it just keeps looping through, and then it stops when I becomes the same length as the array, and we get undefined here because, as I said before, the array counts from 0, but length counts from 1. So if we come in here and we do a -1, we come back and we do 4 statements, call that, we get Dave 21, Sarah. What was in our array again? Yeah. And if we've done a +1, and called 4 statements, Okay. Oh, sorry. The reason I was getting undefined. Yeah, the reason undefined, don't know where this is coming from. I'll have a look in a sec. But the reason I got undefined here is because the array is now longer. If I'd done a -1, it would take 1 off. But array.length. Sometimes you will lock a -1, depending on what you're doing. But we won't get into that. What else? So let's quickly recap. We can define our variables, var or let. One thing to note, var also hoists things. So if I put, like I talked about let having a scope, if I put var in here, then if I define the variable var c in here, then that would also be global scope. But if I use let, it won't. Then we've got an ES5 function and then an ES6 function. We've defined an array, a nested array. We've defined a nested object. We could also have like user2 and then do the same thing in there, and then that'll be multiple objects inside of in a main object, so on. Console logged all the objects using the dot notation. So you just separate them with dot and it goes inside of that property. Set a boolean. Well, truth is always going to be truth, so we'd probably use a const, so it's never redefined. We wrote a basic if function with an if statement in it, and then we wrote a function with a for loop in it. There are other ways to do for loops. There's a while loop, so it will do something while a condition is true. So if we made that a let, so it could be redefined, we could do something like while and then do stuff. Don't actually use do, that's another keyword. But I don't know, while truth, meaning while truth is true, then, or you could also write that, then it'll keep running everything in here until it's no longer true. Then you got a do while, so it'll run anything inside here once, regardless, it'll do it, and then it'll keep running it while the condition is true. Then you got your for loop, like we wrote down here, and you have a for each as well, but we'll do that in an advanced tutorial, along with some other pre-made functions. But that's essentially the main basics of JavaScript. Everything is made from either a variable or a function, an array or an object or a boolean. That's all the basic data types you need to get up and running. So for one last thing, we'll just run through well, a quick function off the top of my head. So function, do let's, I don't know, we'll call it apples, doesn't really matter. We'll write in a 6 format, and if truth then for that I equals 0, well, I is less than 10, well, increment I, and then we'll just console.log hello, and then else, well, console.log world, and then if truth is true, then we'll do this for loop until I is completed, and then truth equals false. Now let's think about what's going to happen. If truth is true, then it will run what's inside of it. So we'll see how this breaks out now. Before we do, have a 10-minute break to see what you think will happen. So we'll just go we'll console log out that. Hello, 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 and then truth is false. One thing we could do is just, while we're in that, we'll console.log truth. So we can see what the value of truth is after. Okay, and then we'll console truth there as well. Make sure we spell it right. Run apples. So hello, and then it still remains true. It keeps printing out until it gets to 10, and then it console logs false. So as truth was true, we get all this. But if we now run apples, we get world. So what's happening is it's going, if truth is true, it's true to start with the first time we ran it. It goes through the for loop. So I is 0. Then what I is less than 10, that's the condition. We're going to increment I after each iteration of what's inside these brackets. So it runs through the for loop. That condition's not broke. It runs through it again and again and again. Console logs out hello and the value of truth. Once it gets to the once I gets to 10, so if it got to 11, then it'd be larger than 10, so it wouldn't run. So it runs till the 10th time. Then it sets truth to false because we've defined it with let and not const, so we can reassign it. It becomes false. Then it console logs truth. The reason it doesn't go on to else is because the condition was originally true. So if we run it again like we did, we then get world. And that's how JavaScript runs. It runs line by line, and it will only run like an if statement if something's true, or however you define it in your code. So we could do if not true, but then it wouldn't run anything, because if it's not true, then it will run this. If we do that, then if it is true, it will run all this, and we'd have to spell true right. You gotta be careful of that, because spelling mistakes are a big thing in JavaScript. If you write one toast and another toast, but you misspell one of them, then it won't work, and you'll be scratching your head as to why it doesn't work. But it's simply just because your variable has been spelt wrong somewhere else. So be careful of that. And it's also apples. There. I've just changed it to a capital W, and it says it doesn't work because this is a lowercase w, meaning JavaScript is case sensitive. That's another important thing to know. But I think that just about rounds up the basics of JavaScript. So, quick summary through. Variables are defined by var, let, or const as keywords. You then write the variable name and assign what it is equal to. If you don't want to assign what it's equal to straight away, you can do that, and then further down you just write hello equals hello, and it will work exactly the same. It can be defined to a string or an integer, or like down here, it's even assigned as an array. The value of that variable is an array, and like down with our ES6 function, we assigned a variable, the name func ES6, and we decided that its value was a function. So variables can be defined as anything, really. They can contain anything inside of them. So then we had arrays with either strings or numbers or whatever inside, then nested arrays. So I had an array which contained two subarrays, an object with a property with some more objects, values inside of it, using the key value pairing system. Sorry about that. Console logged them out with the dot notation, assigned a boolean value to something, wrote a function where if we pass something in as a parameter, we can work out if it's true or false or whatever we want to do with it using an if, else if, and else statement. And then we assigned another function which just had a for loop in it. We could have wrote that outside of the function and just had it run when the code hits it, but thought I'd best wrap it in there. And then another ES6 function which decides if a value is true, then run a for loop inside of it, and then when it breaks the for loop, it assigns the value to something else, and we can just show that with the console logs. And then we showed the difference between, because it was true the first time, when you run it the second time, the if statement will say false, so it'll run this else, and it'll say world, and then we done the whole, if it was a capital W there it wouldn't work, but a lowercase w will. And that's the summary. So I hope this lesson was somewhat enjoyable and helps you get along with the basics of understanding JavaScript. And I hope to see you in future videos. If you want to catch them, remember to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for notifications, because YouTube is strange in its notification algorithms. Anyway, have a lovely day and I'll catch you later.